Hi, this is CoStar News Hotel's Trevor Simpson with a quick note on today's episode of Next Gen and Lodging. This episode, where hosts and their guests share thoughts and opinions on events happening in Minneapolis, was recorded earlier in the month and doesn't necessarily reflect the latest news there. Thank you and enjoy the episode.
Joining us today are Lilly Rocha from the Latino Restaurant Association, and also my colleague and dear friend Davonne Reaves, who also co-hosts Next Gen and Lodging. Ladies, welcome to this edition.
Thank
Well,
you. Happy to be here.
absolutely. Thank you for being here. And Happy New Year. This is our first Next
Yes,
in and Lodging podcast of 2026.
Happy New Year indeed. It's already off to an eventful start. If anybody watches the news out there, it's been an interesting year.
Yep.
So, Lily, I know this is your first time on Next Gen and Lodging, and you're actually coming from a little bit outside the hotel space, but still part of the hospitality and tourism world. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Happy New Year to you both. Yeah, I do come from the currently no, not directly the hospitality space, but in my past, I am a certified meeting professional, CMP and a CMM. So I do come from working with trade shows and hotels and all over the country, all over the world. My career started up in the Silicon Valley when I graduated from UC Berkeley, go Bears. And I started working in the trade show space. And so just basically running international food and beverage trade shows. Eventually, I became very involved in the food community. I was asked to join an organization called the Latino Food Industry Association, which I'm still part of. Was voted president of that organization, and then some of us there are now working in the restaurant space. I come from just parents and lots of family members who own restaurants, like many immigrants do. And so I am currently the CEO and executive director of the Latino Restaurant Association. So a little bit of background, we're based here in Los Angeles, where I'm speaking to you from today. And we have an office in Houston and an office in New York. We have about 1,400 members. About 75% of our membership is based in California, and the rest are divided equally between New York and Houston. And then we have, sprinkled around the entire country. And the organization, like I said, is the sister organization of the Latino Food Industry Association, who deals mostly with everything else except for restaurants. And it's been a lots of eating, of course, and but lots of ups and downs, and currently some downs, obviously, with the current environment now. But yeah, so that's a little of my background in the food industry. But I've been in the food industry for over 20 years.
Fantastic. No, thank you for sharing that with us. And Devon, obviously, you're coming and joining this episode more as a guest, but you're bringing the perspective from the hotel owner and investor perspective.
Absolutely. Yes. So, for those who don't know who I am, Davonne Reeves, as Chris mentioned, one third of Next Gen Lodging podcast. And my background, I actually got started off as the front desk agent, navigated my way to hotel ownership, and now I'm in the fintech world, or prop tech, uh, property, real estate, or prop tech technology, real estate and technology. I have a crowdfunding platform called Vestor, where we connect investors to deal sponsors for commercial real estate projects around the country, including hotels. So I'm happy to be here.
Perfect. Well, ladies, thank you again for joining. This episode, we really want to talk a little bit more about some of the experiences and challenges going on in this world right now, where there's a heightened sense of living challenges for immigrants and especially Latinos, given the government's decision to ramp up ICE. And Lily, maybe before we get into the hotel aspect of it, could you share with us maybe a little bit of what your members have been going through? Because obviously, food and beverage, especially here in California, was hit rather hard by the ICE raids and such. So I was wondering if you could share some insight with what your members have told you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Absolutely. It's been catastrophic. Not to sound the alarms, but we all know kind of what's been happening. But in our community, especially when I say our community, I'm speaking of the restaurant community, but in particular with the Latino restaurant space. It's been devastating in many ways. With regard to the ICE raids earlier this year, it's created a variety of issues within our restaurant community. Everything from folks being targeted. Obviously, it's going to affect the workforce, and then folks not being able to go to work, and then restaurant sales going down. So it's like a multitude, of issues that are snowballing and creating not just for obviously that creates issues for the entire economy of Los Angeles, California, in general, because, we as the Latino workers, we are, I don't have the specific numbers, but, in the entire restaurant community, we are like the backbone of the workers, the workforce in restaurants. So yeah, with the ICE raids, it created a very unstable environment of, basically employment environment where folks were either not going to work at all or just afraid to go to work. And so that I saw an underground kind of community start. So things went, when I say underground, is like where folks aren't going to work but they still need money. So all of a sudden you hear about folks selling things at their house or from different locations. Or so again, not things that I'm condoning or anything like that, but I just heard about. And so, obviously that, is not good for overall. So, that kind of creates like a black market on like food, a lot of things that are happening in the food world. With regard to restaurants, we see sales going down because, whether people, there's not people aren't going to work. So hours are slashed. Restaurants need to close earlier or on certain days. And then, of course, that creates, again, an economy where, if people don't work, they don't have money, they're not going to eat at restaurants. So then, there's just, a cycle of all negative results from that. And we're seeing ICE raids again, ramp up in LA. So, it's just keeps going. We as the entire community, restaurant community, have not recovered from COVID, and so we were just getting over COVID, and then we had here in LA the wildfires in the Palisades and Altadena, which that was kind of our focus right before all of this happened, and then boom, right after the wildfires, we have ICE coming in. So it's been pretty devastating to us as the Latino Restaurant Association community.
Yeah, it was a wild year for LA. Yeah, starting with the fires and then everything else. It just one challenge to the next. Um, you know, what are some things that maybe as an association, has there been any programs or campaigns that you've been helping sort of lead the charge on, given these challenges that have been ongoing?
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, we were working on the wildfire recovery. So, one of the we continue to work on that, and we had been able to receive some grants, local grants, not a lot of money, but we were able to support some of the displaced workers from the wildfires, and then that kind of trickled down to people that weren't going to work. Yeah, we as an association are focusing on the legislative policy work, and so we are working with bipartisan organizations that are leading the charge in policy with regard to giving folks who are giving our immigrant communities a path to citizenship, at the very least, a path to legal employment. So that's one of the things that we are continuing to focus on.
Devon, I'm curious, what have you been seeing in Atlanta? Obviously, Atlanta is a world away from LA, but down in the South with these kind of challenges lately, have you been seeing the same kind of impacts?
No, when I was listening to Lilly, I was like, oh my gosh, we're like living in two completely like different worlds, right? I was uh, just at a restaurant today and, and just driving around Atlanta and, besides the normal traffic, crazy traffic and potholes, it wasn't as just listening to what you were saying about so many restaurants, having to close down early or and then the fire, recovering from the fires and then COVID. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a completely different world. So I'm not seeing the same thing, here in Atlanta when it comes to the challenges as far as with, just going to restaurants. I've never owned a restaurant, and I don't currently own one, but just from what I'm seeing, just, just being someone who loves eating out and love eating food, I don't see the same thing. So I'm so sorry to hear that as far as for California and your members, Lily. That was breaking my heart listening to that. Um, as far as a lot of times what I'm seeing now, when it comes to it's a lot just from people posting on social media a lot. People using their voices and their camera phones, just recording, and not necessarily in Georgia when it comes to ICE or anything, or it's just more so just like, of course, what happened in Minnesota. Now I'm starting to see a lot of activity in Pennsylvania, and just people just recording. So I see a lot of it on social media, and how they're just, of course, targeting, different individuals in different communities. And I haven't personally seen it here in Georgia. So hopefully that answers your question, Chris.
Yeah, I certainly hear about it in LA, and I had an incident myself at LAX of all places.
Mhm.
This would have, I think, June-ish, and I was flying to Istanbul, and I was at LAX, and it was right as the raids were starting here in LA. It was also the same day that our one of our senators had gotten arrested for interrupting Kristi Noem's press conference. And I was boarding my flight, and it was interesting to see ICE meeting not only every arriving flight, but also every departing flight.
Mhm.
And while boarding my flight, I was like the fourth person in line, and I got hauled out of line and questioned by ICE. And they take you off to a corner and they surround you and start asking questions. And you're thinking, well, if this is going to happen, they couldn't have picked a more public place.
Right,
And you just start speaking really loud so that everybody can see and hear what's going on. Um, and it's an unsettling feeling. It's like something watching out of a World War II movie of
right,
wanting your identification papers, wanting to know where you're going, who you're
right,
going with, how much money you've got on you, why do you want to leave the country? It was unsettling.
right,
Um, but it's so I can't
Right.
imagine if you're at your place of work and then you have that
right.
happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I hate that for you, Chris.
Yeah, and
yeah,
I think just kind of chiming in, I mean, I feel it where I think it's a little bit less now, but when it all started happening, it's not just people workers around LA, it's everyone. I mean, I feel, especially at that time, I definitely felt like, hey, I could be stopped. I'm a brown person. I, you know, very much. You see me, I'm Latina, and I felt like I could be completely stopped and picked up, and God knows what, could happen. And do I still feel that way? Yes. I still feel that way. I feel like the fact that we didn't have information where you heard on the news that people were just kind of disappearing, being deported to different countries and all that. Like we have a tiny bit more information now. However, do I travel around with a copy of my passport? Yes, I do. I, you know, it feels very much, again, I wasn't living during the World War II, but it feels very much like what people would be going through. It's like, show me your papers. Like,
Right.
randomly, obviously that is definitely happening here in LA for sure. No doubt.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
that surreal, like you feel like you're in a movie. It's like something you'd see on TV, and then you're suddenly sort of living it. I also had a weird experience in DC at a restaurant where the restaurant had been raided, I think like the week before, and was sitting there. I was then, a week after the raid, sitting there having dinner with people, and some police walked in, and the entire restaurant just went silent. And the police were there because there was a sheriff's show. I think it was National Sheriff's Association had their conference there, and they would just wanting to go have dinner. But it certainly, you see them and it rattles people. It leaves you feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I mean, whatever side, of the political spectrum you're on, it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way where, we're living in sort of like a police state of, where if you're in a restaurant, you're there to enjoy yourself and have a meal, not to, be worried about getting arrested or, kind of what's going on now. And I know that, within our Latino community here in Los Angeles. That is the case. Like I said, when I said, things have gone underground, I don't want to disclose too much information because I can't verify this, but I've heard from many people, people are now, just taking the, restaurant sort of sales underground. It's like, okay, if you want to eat this, come pick it up at my house, where people are now cooking at home and, selling it out of their home kitchens, things like that. So
Wow.
Did you
not,
see?
oh, go ahead.
No, I said, Lily, did you see that news? I think it was on KTLA about this young kid. He was probably, I think, like eighth grade, who his grandmother, if I remember correctly, had for years been selling tamales on a street corner as a street vendor. And she went into hiding, but her grandson, this eighth grade kid, went and filled in for her, and he ran the food cart on the street corner, and he, sold it and sold the tamales on a daily basis, and every day
Yeah.
showed up. He
Yeah.
skipped school. It was an amazing story.
Yeah, no, I did hear about that. And those are the kind of things that, we're dealing with at the LRA. We want to work with the city, just like New York, where there's sort of what they call the entertainment zones, where, there's zones where, they're being designated for like street vendors. I get it. Like restaurants, obviously, don't want people coming in, parking, rolling up, parking in front of the restaurant, start selling, that's been an issue for a while. And so, things like that where we can, designate a zone and help people, have a way to make money. And, the public likes it. We want that, that's been, we've seen that time and time again. And so, we have very successful like Smorgasburg on Sundays and places where, it's been, done in a way where, it's a little bit more organized and, kind of, I want to say like well balanced. Yeah. And that's unfortunate, what happened. And we want to create spaces where people, can sell their goods, in a different way.
So let's talk a little bit about, and Devon, I'm gonna kick this over to you, but there was that incident a week or two ago in Minnesota as the ICE raids and some protests that started off in Minneapolis. There's this incident at a Hilton hotel, and ICE had made some reservations. The operators who were a franchisee of Hilton, they canceled the reservations, and it became sort of this national faux pas. Can you, as an experienced sort of hotel owner, and you've been asset manager, can you give us sort of a play by play in your mindset of what happened there?
So again, just going off of what I saw on social media and just me putting two and two together. When I was reading the emails, it looked like it was someone who, and again, this is just my observation, that was who was an employee of the hotel, of course. It doesn't look like it was the owner or anything, and I don't know if it was the owner, but who sent the email and just stated, hey, you're not welcome here, right? To the ICE, to ICE agents who were planning to stay here. Now, um, I'm looking at it from a business standpoint, and I can understand the emotional standpoint, right? And I think you and I, we talked about this too, Chris. And I even did a video on social media about it. From a business standpoint, when you sign up as when you become a franchisee, you have to adhere to their rules, right? And brands, they have to pretty much accept everyone, right? Anyone who makes a reservation, um, they have to accept them, right? And also ICE is with the government, okay? So they essentially have to accept them. Now, of course, if it was done something unruly to the hotel, to the specific hotel itself, or it was going against, Hilton's brand standards, then it was a different story, right? But it just looked like that the email was sent from an emotional standpoint that they didn't want ICE staying there because there's other businesses in that particular area that was denying ICE business. That's just what it seemed like to me. So from a business standpoint, of course, they were out of line because if they did that to ICE, then let's say, the Black Panthers decide to come, or, Black Lives Matter, or any type of social organization, decide to come, and the hotel denied that group, then Hilton would have to do the same thing, right? Or the brand, or any particular brand would have to do the same thing. So that's why we have to accept all. We can't, because then you come into where you get into discrimination. That's from a business standpoint. Now, from the brand, that particular hotel, Hilton removed that hotel from its reservation system. So from my owner, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like a franchisee's worst nightmare, right? To lose the flag, not being a part of the Hilton reservation system, losing the rewards program, losing the marketing power, not sure if that particular owner had to pay any liquidated damages, meaning that they lost the contract with Hilton. I'm not sure if any of that. So that's just what I'm thinking from an owner's perspective. Like, oh my gosh, what about any bookings that decide to cancel because of that? Right. Future reservations, and they just took the sign down. It was so immediate. And then from the emotional standpoint, it's people who, and again, I don't support what ICE is doing, how they're treating people. I think it's absolutely horrible. I hate watching the videos. It makes me sad, especially, um, it just, makes me tear up when I hear what they're doing, as far as how they're treating people. Right. And, but from an emotional standpoint, I understand why someone and why other businesses decide to deny ICE, right? But from a business standpoint, um, that can't be done. The young woman, unfortunately lost her life, Renee Good. So when I heard about that, prayers to her and her family and her son, and oh my goodness, so and her partner, and which caused a lot of emotional conversation of what really happened and what didn't happen, and so all of those different things, and all of that happened in Minnesota. So those are my thoughts looking at it from an owner standpoint, but having to, unfortunately, when you have to separate the emotional side from the business side on, why it was done, because if you don't support a, government agency, which is a lot of business, for a lot of different brands and hotels, um, which can cause an issue from the business side. So that was my standpoint on it. And I know you've expressed your feelings, Chris. I would love to hear more because you're in the hotel space as well. You're a hotelier as well on your thoughts on how that decision was handled.
Yeah, no, it was I don't know. Regards to that franchisee, I was certainly clapping at their bravery. I thought they did the right thing. And sometimes we got to put our morals above checks and money. And heck, I would go stay there just to show them some support. You know, I think for me, the whole irony of Hilton's decision to then sort of excommunicate this particular franchisee's property, the irony is that, Hilton and all the other brands do all this promotion and uh promotion of human trafficking, that they're going to stand against human trafficking, that they're fighting against it, yet they're fine letting people who participate in human trafficking stay at their hotel. And what ICE does is exactly that. So yeah, so personally, on emotional level, I commend them, and on a business level, I think they made a decision, and they've got to stand by it. So that's my 2 cents on it. I
I
don't
have
know if
I have a question for you, Lily, before you jump in. I'm just gonna be devil's advocate, right? So let's say if it was a Latino group and the hotel did the same thing. They said, we don't want you staying here. And it made way to Hilton, and Hilton removed them from, they did pretty much the same exact thing. They removed them from the system because they denied like a Latino or a black group, because what you do for one, you have to do for all.
Yeah, but I would put it into the World War II context of, would you want the Gestapo staying at your hotel? Probably not. But if a Jewish group showed up, you would certainly give them cover and help them out if you were a, a normal, sane person. So
Yeah,
I don't see it any differently.
yeah, no, and to jump in with that, like if it was a Black or Latino group that was denied, entrance, or, they were denied the opportunity to stay, I think it's, that's kind of a different thing because, this is ICE, and where a Black or Latino group, you're not out there, doing they weren't necessarily doing anything that people consider wrong. A Black group, they're innocent. Why would you like deny them? Latinos, they're innocent. They're in terms of that. Here, the perception of ICE is different um, because of what's been out there. The perception is very, very different. And yeah, right now I think all sides, whatever side you're on, um, business or, politically or whatever, we all want to be treated with respect and with kindness and everything. But I feel like right now, the perception of ICE is very, very different. So I think it's understandable to me too that, and it is my understanding that it was an employee, that it wasn't necessarily the
Yeah,
owner, right?
yeah.
That an employee did this, and then from what I understand too, after the owners did issue an apology and say, that's not our perspective. That's from what I read, and it was an employee kind of doing that. And I do understand their the reason that they did that, because, I would definitely not put an ICE group in the same category as like, Black, Latino, or Jewish group that showed up. Because right now what we're seeing out there is that ICE is, kidnapping, taking people. I mean, for me, it is very real that, I could get stopped and be asked for papers without any kind of just cause. I'm not a lawyer, but I did go to law school. And so, I see all of these, just basic constitutional rights being violated. And that does not sit well with, myself and a lot of people. And I think that's the biggest difference where, we're seeing, this Renee Good and her wife and what they did, it's just
Yeah, that was
unbelievable.
horrible.
What? Oh yeah, and I mean,
That
when
was
I was in law
horrible.
school, yeah, I wrote about like so many other cases that had nothing to do with this, but especially I think it was oh gosh, it was before George Floyd. It was another case where woman and her boyfriend were just asleep, they get their door broken down and then she gets shot and killed. And then it's like, okay, sorry.
You mean Breonna Taylor
Breonna
and
Taylor. Yes,
Louisville?
Breonna
Yep,
Taylor. So
Breonna Taylor in Blue
yeah, that
in
was one of the cases.
Louisville, Kentucky.
Right. So that was one of the, and I, sorry, just, it's been a long time since I
No,
wrote
no, no,
about
it's
it.
okay,
But
it's okay.
that was one of the cases that I analyzed during one of my law classes. And I'm like, this is, unbelievable. And it's just an extension of that I feel is happening right now with ICE. And we're seeing it, we are seeing it with our own two eyes. Like, the video to me it's astonishing that, you know, like half the people see this and then the other
I
half
know.
see
It's like,
that.
are we looking at the same video?
Right,
I
right. And
see.
right.
Okay.
Right. And it's like I have a good friend like for 30 years that, he sees an officer, being attacked, right? And me, maybe it's just because, I am part of the LGBTQ community and, I could have been like Renee Good with my, partner, or like we could have been that couple. I don't know, but I see it in a different way. I didn't see, someone lunging at,
I saw it from different angles. I'm still trying to figure out what it. I'm like, okay,
right.
maybe not.
Well, yeah, and,
Maybe
and then
not
and then
ask
what
the
I
wrong
say,
word.
yeah, right. And then I say whatever angle it is, it's sort of like the same thing that people say, "Oh, George Floyd, you had no idea. He was counterfeiting. He was, ripping off people." It's like, okay, let's go ahead and like say that he was. It still does not give anyone the right to, execute the man in public like that in the way that it happened. Like that doesn't, there's rule of law. If he was doing whatever he was doing, I'm saying, people that I've heard saying, "Oh, George Floyd this." It's like, you know what? You okay, whatever, but it still doesn't give anyone the right. And that's what I feel about Renee. It's sort of like, you know, okay, like do you have the right to shoot someone 3 times in the face? I mean, like, and so it gets really, really, really emotional. And that's where I can understand where someone at a hotel would be like, sorry, you can't stay here. I completely get it. From a business perspective, yeah. I mean, obviously, there's things that, you have to abide by rule of law. Again, um, you have to, you're not supposed to be discriminating against anyone who makes, reservations and things like that. So I do get the logistics of, business. That's what we do in the restaurant world. We get it. We don't want to be discriminating, but it is, right now it's a highly charged, you know, topic. And then, we're seeing it from different angles, like you said, different angles, different perspectives, things like that. You can't tell me ever, like, I'm never going to change my mind about, George Floyd. Like, he was, that should never have happened ever. And that led to, widespread worldwide, protests, and rightly so. And I feel like right now we are in a similar space, but we have a government that's very, sympathetic to, you know, I guess, I don't know what you want to call it, like a police state or whatever, but, where in the past, that would have been completely like more, I think more protests and things like that. But people are scared. People are scared. Like there's no question.
Well, and at the end of the day, we're all humans and we all deserve to be treated as a decent human being, regardless of what we may or may not have done. And I think right now with ICE and what happened at this particular property is, look, you had again, I think comes down to a decision. And if that person made the decision and lost their job, I'm sorry that they lost their job, but they made a choice. I think it was the right one, personally. Um, and at times like this, you do need to stand up and talk. And I'm again disappointed with the hotel industry for not standing up and saying something. I know, Davonne, we started this whole thing with Next Gen Lodging during the BLM protest, and we did
I
it
thought it was,
because,
yeah, I thought of that when we were beginning this episode. I thought of that.
yeah, and that, we did it because the hotel industry wasn't saying anything. They were spineless and didn't stand up and say what was going on was wrong. And as a Latino and as a Californian, I think they're doing the same thing again. And it would be nice if the industry finally would take a stand on something instead of cowering in the background. I chalk it up to, being a business owner. I made the decision that I really don't care if people like or don't like that I'm gay. And if they don't want to do business with me because I'm gay, that's fine. It's no skin off my nose.
Um,
Um,
no, it's funny.
and
I was a little late today, and it was. I told you guys the reason why it was a situation with work, but this particular business that I'm dealing with, it was just like the weirdest stuff was happening, and then I was just like, man. Anyways, I found out they're like super, 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 super right wing. And same here, Chris. I'm like, wait a minute, why didn't I know this? There again, no, no disrespect. Like that's fine. That you have every right to be that. But where I choose to give my money or hire, companies that are in line with, my train of thought. And I think that's where, you know, one of the issues lies here where, a lot of people like you and I know I would definitely support, that hotel. I would go stay there just because of what they did, right? But then there's people that, are like, okay, cancel culture, we're gonna like never go there again. And again, we're in a highly charged, environment right now. But yeah, I mean, I am making changes with that agency that I was talking to because I'm like, okay, I need to, make sure that I'm supporting with my dollars, my family, where, people that believe in, LGBTQ rights or, especially Latino, immigrant rights. Again, we go back to history. If you want to get technical, I have a hat. It says no one is illegal on stolen land. It's like, okay, if we want to get technical about it, people
Well,
of the Latino descendants that are here, that have been here for a long, 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 long time. And so, you know, we've been moved around a little bit, but we were here thousands of years. And so, it gets very ugly. But I'm one of, I'm from that school of thought where it's like, okay, indigenous people, people that I know that I come from, were here on this land prior to European colonization. So I know for a fact that, we've been here. This is a land that, and whatever you believe in, that was colonized by Europeans. And so now we have, today's day and age where people are like, this is not your country. It's like, I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with that. So getting radical, getting crazy now.
yeah, and that's what I just wish as an industry, for once they would take a stand on something. Um, I just yeah, just disappointed. Very, very disappointed. Uh,
Well, I mean,
but
I think,
yeah,
again, because we do represent lots of business groups and we are involved in business groups, we do see the business side of it. But, for me, yeah, like my heart, bleeding heart liberal, I guess, I do understand what, someone could do, how someone can do that, because of the fact that, what we're seeing out there with ICE from a business perspective. Of course, there's been so many cases of, like the people that didn't want to do bake a cake for LGBTQ, or there's just, there's a lot of I guess, polarization at the moment, and nobody wants that. We all want to be treated, we all want to be happy, we all want to be happy and live a good life and be able to go, live our life. We're not here on the planet for very long, and it sucks that, that we have to, whether it's someone who lived during, the world wars, who had to suffer, or people now, it's too bad that, sometimes a large portion of our lives have to be we have to be dealing with things like this because nobody wants,
yeah,
you know.
yeah, absolutely. Devon, I'm curious, if you put your asset management hat back on and just say, okay, this is something like this happened at a property, it could be any property in any town across the country. If you were on that asset manager side, you say, hey, look, this is um, this is a political mess, it's a social mess, but as a property on the property ownership side, what do you think they could do to help try to mend fences here? And I guess it goes back to the same thing with Black Lives Matter. Like what can businesses do to on a positive side to help build bridges between communities right now?
One thing is like, okay, you have to mitigate it. The flag is gone, right? So what can we do to get back to business? To your point, both of you all said y'all would love to patronize that hotel, so that's who you target, right? You target the people who would want to stay at that hotel, of course, to keep the business going. I don't know if that hotel, I would try to see if we can probably turn it into another brand or see if it makes sense to keep it independent, from a business side, right? Because the mortgage, then also like, okay, or there be any repercussions with the lender because we got to prove as a Hilton brand that we're not. So again, you're asking me from an asset manager hat, so that's what I'll be throwing on, right? Okay, how can we mitigate this? And we have to move fast and uh just trying to be proactive with any potential damages that can happen. From the social aspect side of it, like I mentioned before, turning the negative into a positive, right? Standing up for what's right, or what they thought was right, and seeing how we can work in the community, because there's a lot of people that I'm seeing that they're going to Minnesota, to fight the cause and the protests of what happened with Miss Good and just what's going on. And a lot of places are shutting down and a lot of people, they're turning down business because they're serving ice. And so how can we get more involved with the community? Because the hotel already took a stance on what side they're on, right? So regardless of regardless of what any other employees feel, even what the owners feel, the employee that sent that email made a choice of what they felt about the situation. And so just move into that direction, to get more involved with the community, to help the community. Um, Going back to the business side, how can we generate revenue to keep this building open? I don't know if they could even, sell it, right? Again, you asked me what my asset management had. So those are the different things that I would try to think of what to do. And because I always try to find a something positive out of anything that appears to be negative, right? So the hotel got a lot of press. So how can they capitalize off of that? So that's what I would do.
Totally,
That's what I would do.
totally. And I remember somebody telling me that any press is good press. I don't know if that's true or not, but
It is good.
that's what I've been told.
Any press is good press, and it's just if you have the right, if you do, and you only have 2 seconds to literally to capitalize from it, right? So I don't know if they're capitalized on it. I don't know. I haven't heard too much about, so I don't know what they're doing in the community. But if I was the owner, if I was the asset manager, I would be like, okay, Hilton is gone. We got to move on from that. And now what can we do now? I don't know if there are any other brands that we could take on. That's what I would be doing. We don't have that much time. It's the beginning of the year, and let's finish this year off strong. They got to do. I don't know. We don't know if there are investors involved. The investors could be upset because they invested in the Hilton flag and that was an independent. So all of these different moving parts, um that I'm sure. And the crazy thing, because usually when the flag is taken away from a hotel, the owner kind of knows it's coming. They didn't pass QA, they didn't pay their franchise fees, or they didn't pay, so they kind of knew it was coming. But when your flag is just yanked, from overnight, I can only imagine. Like you wake up one day as a Hampton Inn, and literally the next day you're an independent hotel within 24 hours with no plan to even figure out what you're going to do next. So I couldn't even imagine what that owner or that ownership group or asset manager is like, what the hell is this? From a business side, right? So that's my 2 cents.
Well, appreciate that. Well, I know we're coming up on our time here. Um, Lilly, I want to turn it over to you for any closing thoughts on this.
No, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And I think, I agree with that with regard to business, that would be so shocking to just, like you said, usually if something like that is going to happen, you have kind of a heads up, but here just kind of, I can only imagine what the legal blowbacks are. And I'm sure it is not, it's not good. But like I said, I think, we all, whatever side you're on, wherever you work in, we all want, um, to be treated with dignity, fairness, and respect. The hospitality and service industries, like we have a long tradition of welcoming guests, and that's why this situation is so complicated because in hospitality that's what we do. We love our guests, and we want people to feel good. So again, having clarity and the facts always helps because again, even with, the Renee Goods shooting, we have so many perspectives and videos and this and that. And at the core for me, it's, like the reason I feel like I'm right. No, I'm kidding. But it's sort of like, the thought of just people getting killed, on the streets is whether it's someone who, is running after a criminal and then they get shot, even that, like, to me is not like how I want to be, living. And then here, this is more, this is a situation that's, not as clear, I guess, to some people. And, I just, that's what like kind of, I think rubs a lot of people the wrong way, whether, it's like we have courts, we have laws, like there should be, they should be used instead of, what we have, which sometimes feels like the wild, wild west. And, going back to, guns and all that, not going to get into that, but as far as our immigrant communities with the Latino restaurant workers and workforce, yeah, this is something that we're going to continue to work on a bipartisan basis. Like I said, we've been working with different groups that are on both sides of the political spectrum to see how we can salvage, going back to what Davonne is saying about business. It's like, how do we move forward and continue to do what we love doing in our businesses, create sales and, um, create jobs, create community, and how do we fix this? And I think there's a lot of that. So that does give me hope where there's a lot of people on both sides of, the political spectrum that want to get back to work. Excuse me, I'm coughing.
No worries.
But that's what I have to say. I think we have a lot of good people on all sides, and I do feel like there's reasonableness out there, and I think we're going to continue to see how we can make things better and fix a lot of things that are broken because we do have to listen to all sides, of course, and I'm very interested in doing that. So
Well, I appreciate that perspective and insight, Lily. Davonne, was there anything on closing thoughts you wanted to share with our listeners?
No, no, not at all. Is other than, well, I guess I do. I say no, and then I'm about to say a closing thought. But I would just say it's crazy. Well, last year, 2025 started off crazy, and now 2026 is starting off crazy again. And it's sad to see that history is repeating itself in a bad way. And I'm a big history buff. And so when I hear stories of how different people came into power, and it's like, well, how did they allow that to happen? And then now we're like seeing it in real time, or how did certain things happen during a certain time period? Um and I never, because we weren't living during that time, so we couldn't wrap our brain around it. And so now to see it televised, to see it now it's on camera because, you know, their camera phones there now. Imagine if we didn't have camera phones, right? I think the conversation would be completely different, right? Or social media. I think the conversation would be completely different because we wouldn't know a lot of these things. And so my closing thoughts is just really I'm just trying to be as positive and uplifted in prayer as much as I possibly can. Um, and so my closing thoughts for anyone who's listening and trying to wrap their brain around what's going on, because a lot of this is emotional. Sometimes I have to take a break from social media because it's just too much to see what's happening to people, and and to see people argue in the comments and just talk so bad about someone and what that person should have done and they wouldn't have been I mean, just to hear people talk a certain way is just it's just mind blowing to me. And to even see how some privileged people are and that they don't understand how to step outside of their privileged box to see certain things. And just hoping and praying that that the world would get better, because I have a little one, I have a son. So it scares me a lot of different things that I see on social media, because I just hope it doesn't happen, anything happen to me, or 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 to my son or anyone other's children, right? Miss Good, she was a mother, and her she's gone. um and she and how her son is, doesn't have a mother or the father because they're both gone. So those things, just trying to be positive and continue to be lifted and surrounded in prayer. And not just, for anyone who, like I said, who's trying to wrap their brain around and trying to seek comfort and just trying to just get through every day, is just continue to be positive and continue to just, if you don't pray, if you're not religious, just try to be positive and continue to move forward and always look for a brighter day. So that's my closing thought.
Amen. Thank you for that, Devon.
Yeah.
It is important to remember to stay positive and keep a sunny disposition, especially in challenging times like this right now. Well, I want to thank you both, Lilly and Devon, for joining on today's episode. I know it's a sensitive and difficult topic, but I thought it was important that
Mm.
somebody in the industry acknowledge it and also get us back to our roots for next gen and lodging. So thank you both. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. This is Chris Henry for Next Gen and Lodging and CoStar News. We will catch you next time. Thanks very much. Bye bye.
Hello, I'm Luke Haynes, People Newsletter Editor, CoStar News, and the host of Top Credentials, a monthly podcast exploring the colourful careers of those working at the top of UK commercial real estate. In the episodes, we discover the valuable lessons influencing the daily decision-making of property sector leaders, and hear about the aspects of their job that make it a little easier to get out of bed each morning. We'll also ask for their views on the latest news and policies shaping our constantly evolving industry, and even get them to share a famous quote or song title they think defines their career or the profession. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of the Next Gen and Lodging podcast was recorded in January 2026 and edited by Trevor Simpson. Head to costar.com/hotel news for more information on the global hotel industry, and look for all of our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen.